Cineboys to Cinemen, episode 19.
19.
Hope you're well, wherever you are, whatever you're doing. Another unplanned hiatus.
Yeah, strange that.
Yeah, I don't know how it happened. I guess going on stags, moving house,
living
lives.
Happens.
Busy boys. But we're back this week and for many other weeks.
Yes.
No interruptions, no excuses.
No, we can't. No.
Not again.
No, yeah. I mean, considering the sheer amount of correspondence we've received, outraged fans.
Yeah.
I think it's safe to say we won't be missing another week.
No. I'm not going to any other weekend stags or anything anymore.
No way. Yeah, wedding as well. Let's just not go to any.
Yeah, I'm
weddings.
not going. I'm not going to any.
Yeah,
I've been looking for an excuse, so there it is. This week, the Master Gardener, Paul Schrader, completing his trilogy of lost souls, redemptive arcs.
Yep. Man in a Room stories. So, like, voiceover, male protagonist hunched over a desk seems to be quite like a common theme amongst these films.
Indeed, in a lot of Schrader's work generally, broadly speaking. So we'll review the film, obviously. Preceding that will be discussion about Schrader's work, because he's quite a pivotal figure, certainly in American cinema.
Yeah.
Not only as a writer and then a director, but as a film theorist and contributing a lot of sort of themes and ideas, not only in his work, but in his essays and his book, which I think tells you a lot about him as a film watcher and indeed as a filmmaker. So we'll get into the nitty-gritty of that later.
Nice.
Speaking of later, should we get there now?
Let's do it now.
Questing the cinematic void. Okay then, before we begin the discussion and then the review, it's time for our new segment, something we teased earlier. It's emails of the week. Yeah.
I cannot wait.
So, we put our email address out there to you, the adoring listener, and
the one listener.
just the adoring listener, yeah, singular. And it was an opportunity for you guys to sort of get involved in some of the discussions we've had, ask us questions, critique our opinions, or even take the piss. That's fine.
Yeah.
We're desperate.
We'll read them out.
We'll take anything. So I've got an email here from Google, and it says we noticed a new sign-in to your Google account on a Chrome OS device. If that was you, you don't need to do anything. If not, we'll help you to secure your account. Check activity. That's good of them.
Yeah, interesting.
Really. We didn't get anything.
No, we didn't get anything.
No, we haven't had a single email.
No.
I think I'm chalking that down to the... this is on me, by the way. Not advertising the episode on our Instagram, despite it being up for about a week. So... to sort of calm our bruised ego, that's what I'm going to say. Or put ointment on the bruised ego. Do you put ointment on bruises?
I don't, personally, but I'm sure it has happened in the past.
I just urinate on them.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah,
that's probably
urinate on myself.
Yeah, much easier.
Yeah.
Cheap.
Yeah, cheaper. Yeah.
Do email, though, if you have any questions about anything. CINEBOIS 2 CINEBOIS @gmail.com.
Yes, it'd be great to have some actual human interaction. We're going to put out a poll on our Instagram. I don't know how to do that. My partner's going to help us do that. I've got a clue. But to see how we can sort of generate some interaction from you guys, because I think it'd be a nice little addition to have.
Yeah,
just
definitely.
To get off your lazy fucking arses and do it, you bastards. Anyway, bitterness aside.
No.
Schrader.
Yes.
As mentioned earlier in the intro, a pivotal figure in the formation of new wave American cinema from the 1970s onwards.
Yeah, definitely.
Perhaps most famously known for his collaborations with Martin Scorsese as a writer.
Yeah.
And even more famously on top of that, Taxi Driver.
Yep.
And then working with him, of course, subsequently on films such as Bringing Out the Dead.
Oh, he did The Last Temptation of Christ.
of Christ, which I imagine would have been quite personal for him, as he had as religion's a huge influence on his work and
big
him
time.
as a human being.
Yep.
But also a bona fide genius in his own right as a director, responsible for many great films, some pretty naff ones as well, as I think you want to mention a couple of.
Yeah, I watched one. Well, I watched an hour of one of them last night. and mate, it was dreadful. It was
Wow.
genuinely dreadful.
Well,
But
I'm
there
looking
you go.
forward to hearing about it because I've not seen it and I only know
Yeah.
little things about it. So
Interesting.
yeah, but every director's got a couple of duds under them, I guess, or the vast majority of them do.
Yeah.
But that shouldn't detract anyone from seeking out his great films. I think talking, Blue Collar, Mishima Life in 4 Chapters, Hardcore, and his more recent films, this trilogy.
Yes.
In fact, the Master Gardener concludes. First Reformed, starting with First Reformed.
Yep.
The middle being
The Card Counter.
The Card Counter, which I actually haven't seen, which is really shitty of me considering doing an episode about him.
I've not seen a lot of his filmography, actually.
Okay.
Just to kind of put that out there now.
We can sort of fill the gap because you have seen Card Counter.
I have,
and I've
yes.
seen most of his older films, so we
Okay.
can sort of
Good.
tack it together.
Yeah.
A Frankenstein of monster of film opinion
Yeah,
about
yeah.
Paul Schrader.
Yeah.
But yeah, the point is this guy's a big fucking deal.
Yeah.
Not only that, he is a film essayist and theorist. Someone that was brought up in a very strict religious household, wasn't allowed to engage with much culture as a result. Broke away from religion, broke away from all of that, disavowed religion, although he's turned back to Christianity now in his older age.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. But he found cinema, and cinema became the medium that sort of enveloped him and put him on the journey to being, obviously, the writer-director he is. But his book is incredibly famous in film theory circles, film academic circles, and it's called Transcendental Cinema. The term that he coined for films that sort of eschew realism in favour of a slow cinema. So it's like a cinema often devoid of answers, uninterested in sort of overt or explicit conclusion,
Yep.
and disinterested also in finding sort of catharsis and narrative payoff.
That's actually, do you know what? I didn't know that. That's really interesting because one of my points I was going to make about him is that his films can often appear like quite stilted at first.
Yeah.
I always think like there's no sort of obvious style and it feels like you're sort of watching a play. Like the dialogue and stage directions are sort of quite obviously presented and it takes a while to get used to it, but eventually it kind of washes over you, right? And you get a sort of, oh no, wait, these are actually brilliant performances and like there's something else going on here. It's not just stilted in like a bad way. It's just like a really unique style.
Yeah.
And I thought that, we'll talk about the Master Gardener in a bit, but that it was really, really present in the Master Gardener and in a Card Counter as well. But especially thought it was kind of a unique approach.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting you say that because I think by his own estimation, the catharsis doesn't come from, as I said before, narrative payoff. Or the conclusion of a character's arc per se.
Yeah.
It's more being sort of enveloped in the stasis of a movie.
Yeah.
So the pacing of a film envelops you in a way that's the catharsis.
Okay. Yeah,
and you're sort of submerged by the unknown, the unknowable. And the book focused explicitly on filmmakers like Bresson or Ozu. And he really sort of dug deep into aspects of their work. I've not seen every Ozu film, I've not seen every Bresson film, but from having an idea of what Schrader was talking about, certainly with Ozu, I'll sort of go with Ozu because I know a bit more about his work. He's absolutely on the money there about this sort of exploration of the unknowable.
Okay,
Sort of, translating that cocktail of potent, sort of almost inexplicable feelings and ideas onto the screen in a way that feels sort of really authentic.
Okay.
It's not an easy thing to do. I think a lot of people would see it as a cop-out, but it's, I think, harder than actually probably coming up with a film that's got a clear structure.
Yeah.
Well, obviously that has its own challenges, but I think there's something really in that. It's interesting because it's not necessarily focused so much on reality per se, or portraying a sense of realism, but I think there is a sense of realism in enveloping you as an audience member in that sort of stasis that the characters are experiencing.
Yeah.
And within that, having a connection on the basis of the unknowable.
Okay. Yeah.
And I think it's interesting that you point out that a lot of his films feel that way.
Yeah.
And you can tell that this theory that he sort of pioneered, and has become, one of the mainstay theories in film academia, it's a central part of a lot of his work. Not all, but a lot of his films will have elements of that.
Right, okay.
But I think in the case of Master Gardener, it feels pretty obvious to me anyway, and I think you said that when you chimed in, it's very much like that.
Yeah, to the extent where when I started watching it, I was like, I don't know if I like this.
Yeah,
but
okay.
I ended up really enjoying the film actually.
Yeah.
But it took about 10 minutes for me to kind of get on board with that feeling that
Yes.
he's trying to portray. And like
Yeah.
initially, it just looked like it sort of reminded me a bit of quite a young filmmaker trying stuff out, and then I realised about 10 minutes in, as okay, now there's actually some mastery going on here. But
Yeah.
it does take a while to get used to, which is why I'm a bit gutted I didn't see it at the cinema, actually, because I think that would have washed over me a bit quicker. Yeah, I watched it at home through legitimate means, of course. But I was looking for it. I searched for it on Netflix before, and I couldn't find it. Like, obviously, you sort of always have to check. And then this time, last night, I was like, oh my God, it's on there. I started watching it, and I was like, what the fuck? Ralph Fiennes is in this. And I was like, hold on a minute. What's going on? I was watching The Constant
I was
Gardener.
going to say, it was The Constant Gardener.
I was like, oh, fuck. So I had to find it elsewhere. But, yeah, that's that was a little bit, like, really confusing. So I was like, this doesn't feel right. Like, this is set in Africa.
Yeah.
No.
No, this isn't it.
Yeah, Joel Edgerton's nowhere to be seen.
Yeah, this is a mediation of redemption through the lens of white supremacy and the race ideology that's destroying America.
No. Seems like quite a sort of trite love story so far. Yeah. Anyway, there we go. Humorous story number one. And the only one, actually, to be honest.
Yeah, I've got nothing. I guess his filmography would be a good place to start. And again, we sort of mentioned earlier that he's obviously most famously his collaborations with Scorsese as his sort of writer for a lot of his great films.
Yeah.
Raging Bull was another.
That's right. Yeah. Okay, we're probably missing out.
He's one of those. Like, I didn't even know that he wrote until very recently that he wrote Bringing Out the Dead.
Yeah, same.
I had no idea about that, and that is one of my low-key favourite Scorsese movies, and I had no idea. So,
yeah, I love that movie.
Yeah, great film. But he's someone that, I guess, and this applies to him as a director as well, I think, is that he's the master of pulling you into the sort of the world of the lonely.
Yeah,
into
definitely.
this sort of he can sort of almost put you in the headspace of loneliness, or souls bogged down by isolation, their demons, biases, or sort of their proclivities.
Oh wow, okay.
And I think you ultimately, because of that sort of transcendental approach, that slow burn approach, leaves a lot of time for characterization and not in the way that serves like a grander sort of 3-act structure. Although I'm sure you could apply that to most of his films, if not a few of them.
Yeah.
It's all about serving that again, that sort of the unknown.
Yeah.
And I think that works really well in sort of submerging you as a viewer in the worlds of these characters, these people that are clearly not quite right.
Yeah.
And through that, you connect with them, you empathise with them, and you begin to think that you understand them.
Yeah.
What makes it sort of doubly more interesting, I guess, on that basis is that you're connecting to people that often representations of a part of society that so many desperately attempt to ignore.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And how that sort of the ignoring of that type of individual or just this way of life is reflective of a wider issue in society. And then as you connect with that and start to get on board with that, the characters tend to have it of almost sort of betraying you.
Yes.
And that betrayal almost says more about the society they inhabit, the space they inhabit.
Yeah.
Obviously, Taxi Driver is the textbook example of that, right? And
Yeah.
Travis Bickle, a war veteran, comes back from Vietnam into a world that he doesn't give two shits about what he's done, what he's seen. He's clearly really unwell, and he is just left to etch out this sort of sad, lonely existence where he desperately looks for things to sort of nail his colours to the mast on, and that leads him down this dark path. And his attempts to connect with others just end up in complete failure because he's not built or fit or been supported enough to engage with human beings. Just the fundamental aspects of communication that he just cannot do. He deliberately picks a career path that facilitates that inability to sort of communicate with others. And as the film goes on, you start to sort of feel empathy for him on the basis that this is clearly just a human being that has been chewed up and spat out as a result of some sort of American imperialism, goes to war, comes back, and all the flag waving and all of that is just artifice, and what's left behind is this sort of individual that's got no support networks and nothing, and you connect with him on that basis.
Yeah, and there's also, I always think, like, in a lot of his work, they do eventually meet someone who they kind of is different, right?
Yeah.
So it happens in The Master Gardener, it happens in The Card Counter, it happens in Taxi Driver with Jodie Foster's character.
First Reformed as well with the environmental activist.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
There's always someone that sort of semi brings them out of that sort of sordid grief hole. And they like the way they react to it is like quite unusual. They're sort of charmed by them, and yet it's the classic thing, the drive thing, the scorpion and the frog, right? The fact that no matter what happens, they will always ultimately even if the ending is like quite happy for them. They get dragged back into that world that they inhabited previously. And their sort of attempt to sort of lift them out of that hole is always, I always think it kind of fails. Like even at the end of Taxi Driver, which is like quite redemptive, it's still in his nature to be kind of. You still feel like he's going to be the same sort of person afterwards. Right?
It's interesting that as well, because these characters that end up sort of supporting the main character and bringing them a little bit back into the world are also troubled individuals as well. So that almost sort of. It's about these sort of troubled individuals finding each other. And sort of like trying to figure out this way to sort of scramble up together and get something meaningful out of one another. And it's interesting you talk about Taxi Driver in the context of the ending, that redemptive ending. There's so much discourse about that being a fantasy.
Yes.
And fantasy, I think, is a key part of Schrader's, particularly his later work about these masculine figures, the masculine archetypes that he writes about, these figures, who are dogged by demons of many different kinds, seeking redemption. And often, I sort of felt that in Master Gardener as well. There's this sort of veneer of fantasy that doesn't quite sort of sit right with sort of trajectory of the character. Despite the fact that he clearly is someone that is on a path to redemption. And in some ways, I mean, depending on your worldview, I know this is a particularly divisive film given the subject matter.
Oh God,
I felt was sort of deserving of that, and we'll get into that a little bit more later on.
Yeah, definitely.
But that fantasy element is really interesting, and I think the idea that him going in and killing, it's pimps, isn't it? He kills Taxi Driver. Is it pimps?
Yes, yeah.
Is it Harvey Keitel?
I think it is, yeah.
A lot of people are saying that's just the fallout is redemptive, like everyone's really supportive.
Yeah.
But it's not in a way that sort of derails that sort of, that sort of the tone of Schrader's work, and that's in a sense that he is poking questions about wider society, and the response to that, even if it is a fantasy, is troubling. It's somewhat representative of how some people feel about this need to clean America up. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Definitely. It's there's a very obvious fantastical moment in The Master Gardener where they're driving along that road and all the flowers start blooming.
Yeah.
And that was really odd for me. And also, like, I forgot how sentimental he can be when he wants to be. He can be really quite sweet about romance and stuff. Even if the romance is in itself like sort of troubling and unusual. Like, there's still always a morally ambiguous sweetness about it.
That's a really good way of putting it. I like that a lot. Yeah, that's really interesting. Because he is a filmmaker that's sort of, I think he is obviously someone that, as you said, is very sentimental, but he's also a filmmaker that doesn't mind ruffling feathers. He's been commenting quite a lot on the sort of woke culture, and he's very critical of that.
Yes.
From a creative perspective, he was saying that in an interview a few years ago, he was going to not a few years ago, I can't remember how long ago it was, but he was going to hire Kevin Spacey for a film and stuff like that. Do you know what I mean? So I think he's got this streak in him. He's got this ability in him to ruffle feathers and to feel frustrated and to sort of champion the art form of cinema above anything else, which obviously has its troubling connotations to it.
Absolutely.
But this is someone that. That's why I sort of find him so fascinating on the basis that he's clearly a sentimental fella. And he's commenting on a lot of the sort of darknesses and the troubles of American society in a very meaningful, shocking way. But he also has this propensity to be like this sort of like, sort of just likes to ruffle feathers and doesn't mind sort of throwing his opinion out there, even if the landscape is sort of generally speaking, or broadly speaking, over it,
Yeah,
over what he has to say. You know?
Completely. He's a provocateur, isn't he? Like that's
it, yeah.
sort of the thing that I think he sort of prides himself in that.
Yeah.
And it can be a little bit like he can sort of devalue himself without realizing there's a lot of stuff he puts on Facebook that Lee remembers off by heart. By the way, our friend Lee.
His Facebook.
Yeah.
Page is a treasure trove.
It's
mental.
It is absurd, yeah. But it's strange because then you make something like the Master Gardener and the Card Counter, and they're like really competently made, and like he's not insane, like he knows what he's doing.
He's a very clever bloke.
Yeah, clearly. But it is unusual, and like he does, it's not like he's against being a decent human either. That's not what he's championing against. It's like there's a lot of stuff, especially in the Card Counter and the Master Gardener. There's stuff to do with sort of race in there, which is I actually think like quite modern opinions. I mean, not modern, as in like I guess woke would be the only way to describe it really. But there's a compassionate side to him and a very liberal side to him as well, I think, which does show.
I think this film certainly divided a lot of people, certainly in the context of the modern lens in which we watch films, and a lot of people watch films.
Yeah.
And I can sort of understand that. It sort of reminded me of the fallout. It wasn't quite as intense, actually, but the fallout of 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri, right?
Oh, yeah.
That film, obviously, with the redemptive arc of Sam Rockwell's character.
Yes.
Obviously, that was a really sort of semi-heated cultural discussion about the worth of these kind of characters having redemptive arcs.
Yeah, true.
And I think that's a discussion that should be had. I mean, regardless which side you sit on the fence, it's a discussion it's interesting to have. People have this habit of saying, "Oh, these people, they just want to ruin it." But these kind of discussions have sort of always happened in film discourse. I just think maybe they're more publicised because of things like the internet, etc. But I think there's a similar discussion to be had here. I think Schrader's characterization of that, not only the troubling ideology but the subsequent redemption, for me earns it more than 3 Billboards. I'd
agree with that, actually. I didn't think 3 Billboards. I thought Sam Rockwell's character was quite interesting as well, but this one does it even better.
Yeah, I would say so.
I think partially down to performance. Again, Rockwell's a great actor.
Yeah.
But Edgerton blows it out the fucking water on this film.
Isn't he?
Really good.
Yeah.
There's a great line in it where he's just like, I used to be this person, but now I'm just a gardener. And that kind of sums it up, really. And like Schrader's attitude towards change and how people can change. And how I really think he believes that people can have a second chance. As is, I mean, there you go. That's redemption right there, isn't it? Which is a through line in all of his, a lot of his work, anyway. Even Bringing Out the Dead has that ever so slightly when he meets Patricia Arquette, and he gets lifted out of that sort of narcissism and insomniac kind of like madness. Sort of gets lifted out of that, and there's a redemptive side to that character as well. So
it's interesting, and we talk about this idea of him being socially conscious, and not in a way that it should offset any of his sort of more troubling remarks, But I think about films like Blue Collar, Richard Pryor, Harvey Keitel, and Yaphet Kotto, and it's this sort of really fantastic talk, sort of study of the power of corruption, power of money, and how it can sort of impact and manipulate one's personal values, your sort of moral compass. It's this idea of the working man fighting for what's right, but at the same time, when they're sort of picked off and isolated by these sort of higher powers, corrupted essentially so easily. So there's. I mean, that is a fucking great film. I mean, Richard Pryor, and that's superb. I mean, they're all great. It's 3 fantastic performances from 3 fantastic actors. But it's just interesting that there is this sort of, like we say, this social consciousness about the way society is going and how it's sort of impacting, in many ways, the people in the lowest rungs of society.
Oh, yeah, okay, right.
Because his films do tend to deal with sort of struggling in people.
Yeah.
Whether it be like people haunted by past traumas of conflict, like Travis Bickle or Major Charles Rain from Rolling Thunder, for example. These are people that are, by their nature of their experience, have fallen down the cracks into the lowest depths of society. Then you've got, film like Hardcore, which is about a descent into that from the
Right.
perspective of a devoutly religious man trying to find his daughter who's sunk into this world of sort of what he perceives as depravity.
Yeah.
Porn, drug use, violence.
Yeah.
So it does seem about sort of going into this mire, either finding people in it or having a character that sort of pulls you into it.
Yeah.
And saying something, again, this a few times already, but saying something about wider society. So that social conscious, I think, is something that shouldn't be ignored.
Yeah.
I think you can sometimes, I think it's hard to do. It's easy for us to sit here and say that you shouldn't ignore those things. Of course, if you find it difficult, that's fair enough.
Yeah.
But I think it would be a shame to miss out on someone that I think has got a really keen eye for social commentary through the lens of these sort of struggling, depraved, or sort of wounded psychologically or physical individuals.
Yeah, definitely. No, that's good. I think the card counter is kind of an interesting example of that as well, because the card counter isn't concerned with anyone who's been left behind in terms of like being part of a society. He's sort of chosen to leave it behind himself because of what he knows he's like and what he knows he's capable of when he enters society as well.
Right,
so it's like
okay.
quite often about past choices and the removal of that person from the wider world and kind of leading them to become a little bit more insular as like a choice for them. And same with Master Gardener as well, but like, yeah, that film, The Card Counter, is really interesting in that he kind of gets pulled back into it, not through choice, but through sort of just circumstance. Again, sometimes a lot of his films can be sort of similarly plotted.
Yeah.
That is a bit of a problem, I do think, with his films, is like the plot ends up being quite similar, although that might speak to what, his sort of how do you pronounce it? Transcendental side is that, they are, but the films aren't really that concerned with plot. They are majorly concerned with character, and that's one of the Card Counter's real strengths, the way Oscar Isaac portrays this. Very lonely, very almost embarrassed about his past choices, to the extent where it's sort of influencing his current behaviour. Very skilled at one thing. So you've got Taxi Driver, really good at driving taxis, gardening, being a priest, or counting cards. It's the same, and it's there's a through line there with all of his films, and I would definitely, I'll stop going on about it in a second, but I would recommend watching The Card Counter, because it is like something which grew on me after quite a while after I watched it, and it's something that sort of sticks in my memory as being like quite a real gem. But it might take a while to get to that point. So
it's interesting with Schrader's films because it sometimes feels like certainly some of the new ones. I think First Reformed got quite a lot of buzz, but The Card Counter, which I haven't seen, it's just one of those things I have every intention of seeing it, but it just falls down the pile.
Yeah.
And again, I'm sure as you can tell, I'm a huge fan of his, so it's not any reflective of his skill as a filmmaker. But even with like Master Gardener, as someone that loves his work and values him incredibly, particularly in the lens of American cinema, I had no idea this film was coming out.
No, same.
I think it literally just came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And I do think that his films have that. They just sort of
they appear.
come in and then they go.
Yeah.
And I think that's, I don't know why that is. I don't know if that's because of his sort of recent stance on things like, the woke culture, his attacks on those sorts of things. And but it's just interesting.
Maybe. He must get funding from somewhere. Like, Master Gardener had a budget of almost $5 million. But, I know that's not actually that much in the context of, like, making a film. But,
there's some big hitters in that movie. It's not as if...
Sigourney Weaver.
Yeah.
They were going to... Zendaya was almost in it.
Oh, really?
And, she pulled out, I think, at the last minute.
Was it scheduling clash?
I think it was,
Yeah,
it was like June.
I think I remember reading that. Yeah.
It was like June or something. But, and then obviously Joel Edgerton. So yes, it's interesting how his films do just come and go. Like, I'd never heard of The Card Counter until Lee lent it to me on Blu-ray. I remember I think I saw a poster for it on IMDb once, and then it just left. And it just kind of disappeared, which is really unusual considering the guy wrote Taxi Driver.
Yeah, and he's still making good movies. He semi-consistently. I think his last three films, I haven't seen Card Counter, but I'll take you guys' word for it, and I'm sure I will enjoy it. But This guy's consistent. I mean, again, looking through his films in the sort of 70s as a writer into the 80s and 90s, as a filmmaker, there's a fairly strong vein of consistency in his work. Just some duds, though, right? I mean, talk to me about this Lindsay Lohan vehicle.
Oh, mate, yeah. So I just watched The Master Gardener. It was like 9:30, and I was like, I could get another Schrader film in here. And The Canyons is something that I sometimes go down a rabbit hole about reading about nightmarish productions. Always starts with Apocalypse Now. Like, I love reading about how that film was made. And it's really fascinating about... I just find it fascinating reading about the process and how the process can go so wrong, and yet there's this masterpiece at the end of it. And The Canyons came up. Lindsay Lohan, James Dean with 2 E's, notable for being effectively a porn actor.
Oh, is he a major?
Yeah, he's in it a lot. Like he does more acting than Lindsay Lohan in it. Like he's quite.
How is he in it?
Second billing. Sorry.
How is he in it as an actor?
Not brilliant.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I assumed, but I didn't want to sort of just assume on the basis that he's in porn. But
he plays like this sort of smarmy film producer, and it just doesn't work. Like he looks too young for a start to be like a film producer. He looks about 25 in it. But anyway, I thought I'd watch it because I heard about how much of a nightmare it was to make, largely sort of stemming from Lindsay Lohan's like addiction troubles. Yeah. So that made it quite tough to make, apparently. So I was like, right, let's give it a go. Let's see what the end product was like. It's so odd because you can tell Schrader really tried to tap into something and tried to sort of tap into those themes that we'd just been discussing. I think he's trying to comment on the sort of superficiality of Los Angeles and the superficiality of the film business, but it ends up playing like a sort of 90210 episode, but with more sex, and it's really a lot of aspects of it are really amateur. Like the way it's shot is just odd. Sometimes it looks quite nice and clean and crisp, and other times it's like really noisy. It's like it was one of those films that sort of looks like it was shot half on an iPhone.
Right. Okay.
And that happens a lot recently. Like I watched a Ben Wheatley film that did that, In the Earth. It just inexplicably cuts to iPhone footage. It really irritates me.
It was actually iPhone footage.
I could tell, yeah.
In the Earth, you'd be able to with your technical know-how.
Yeah, it was iPhone. I think it was an iPhone. And it's just curiously unfinished. I think he must have just lost faith in it halfway through. The casting's pretty shit as well. Like, I mean, obviously, I actually didn't mind Lohan in it. I thought she was all right. Like, she plays her character well, of like what sort of scraps of it there are. And then he's just hired these sort of like hunky TV boys in it that just can't really act properly.
Yeah, there seems to be a sort of an influx of those kind of people that end up in like teen dramas or vampire.
Yeah, True Blood.
Boys, right? The kind of like American sort of like fairly handsome men that have just been grafted out of ham.
Yeah,
and
completely.
sort of had like humanity somehow bestowed upon them, and they've just been pushed out into the world to sort of just never age and constantly be like Chad the werewolf by night until they're 58.
Yeah, zero charisma though. Like,
absolutely wafer thin. I'm not bitter. No, I know exactly what you mean, and it's interesting as well because obviously I would imagine I haven't seen the movie and I know very little about it apart from the fact that it was troubled by with Lohan, because that obviously comes up in when you read about sort of film productions. Again, as you said, that comes up, but it's interesting. He's probably trying to make a film that skirts with that darkness that these characters are enveloped in. Hence the casting of James Dean.
Yeah, he's so weird.
And Lohan herself, and you like the idea of that paying off.
Yeah, I really did.
Because that would have added like a real sort of, I can't think of a word for the lack of a better, meta sort of study of culture and
Hollywood. It would have been like his Mulholland Drive if it had done well. Yeah. But it isn't.
The film that really came to mind, this is such a fucking deep cut and way out of the realms of this film, but you're JCVD? You seen that? Yeah. So do you know like that sort of reflective mediation on like bargain bin actor life?
Yes.
Bargain bin action film star, starting out as like a genius, not a genius, but as someone that was loved and revered worldwide, was in big, heavy-hitting blockbuster films in the sort of early to mid, even late 90s.
Yeah.
Forced to etch out of life as a sort of straight to DVD bargain bin action star for sort of the
Second
kind of
rate.
men who buy Nuts magazine,
Yeah,
or used to.
Edward Furlong is another example of that trajectory.
And I just thought it was interesting mentioning that ilk, because that's a film that really does it really well. It sort of wrestles with the idea, the nature of celebrity and culture and being chewed up and spat out, and the sort of personal problems that he had in his life, and he fuses it all together into quite a meaningful movie.
Yeah, yeah.
And the idea of the sort of separation between the martial arts star and the actor, and
Yeah.
I don't know, it's a real aside.
No,
But you know, when those films work, you know, they commit to it, and it's even shot in a kind of shitty way.
yeah.
It's sort of reflective of those really naff action films that are literally just there for like 50-year-old blokes to sort of fist pump at 3 a.m. in the morning when they can't sleep.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, you're right.
I don't know, it's interesting. And I think they can work. So I can sort of see what, even though I've not seen the film, and my only reference point is JCVD at this current time, I can sort of see that intention.
Yeah, that intention is completely there. It just doesn't stick the landing, unfortunately. I would say watch it for a bit. Don't see, like, I've only got an hour in myself. Like, it could get amazing in the last 38 minutes. I'm not sure. Yeah. But like, just it's an oddity, and it's quite curious, and there is some quite good moments in it, like out of nowhere, like there's some quite tense moments, but it's too graphic as well. Like I feel like there was no need for it to be that sort of gratuitous. It doesn't feel like it serves anything. It doesn't help that it was clearly shot on like multiple different cameras. It all feels a bit seedy.
I mean, that might speak again to sort of Schrader's more sort of incendiary side, that likes to ruffle feathers.
Yeah, and I think he was trying here. It just didn't work. Briefly want to mention as well Dominion prequel to The Exorcist, which he directed. And this was a film, again, really troubled production. He shot it. The studio was like, this is shit. Literally, like, I think they even sort of said it to his face. They're like, right, don't knock down any of the sets. You're out. Sorry, mate. We're going to get Rennie Harlin in of Die Hard 2 fame as the replacement.
Steady hands.
Yeah.
He was a fairly steady pair of hands at that time.
Yeah, he's done a few bangers, right? He did Cliffhanger, that Stallone film. Great movie.
Yeah, I like that movie.
I quite like Nightmare on Elm Street 4 as well. That was him. But, yeah, so...
Is that Dream Warriors?
That's
3.
That's 3, yeah. This is the Dream...
Sorry everyone.
Mate.
Please email it.
I apologise as well.
Yeah.
It's embarrassing. This is the Dream Master. You fool. No, but yeah, so they got him in, and Rennie Harlin, or even though I think Dominion was like $30 million it cost to make, Rennie Harlin spent an extra 85 doing the whole thing again, shooting the whole film again, and that film is called Exorcist: The Beginning.
Okay.
So there's 2 prequels to The Exorcist. One of them is Paul Schrader film, the other one is Rennie Harlin, and they're really weirdly similar in a lot of ways. Like the script is the same.
Did Schrader write it?
I can't actually remember if he wrote it.
Let's Google it.
I know. I think Blatty might have had a hand in writing it.
Okay.
Yeah. But it's so weird. So there's this weird like artifact where you have the one that got released in cinemas, Rennie Harlin's version, and then Paul Schrader like scraped money together, like apparently asked a band to do the music for free, that kind of thing, and like made Dominion. So, and they're the same movie. Like there's a lot of the same sets, but there's a couple of shots which make it into both films. The same cast by and large, I think, all the costumes and stuff. And yeah, that's just like, I mean, I'm going on a bit about it now, but it's a real oddity, like that artifact that Paul Schrader was involved with. I mean, I think he was probably selected for his a lot of his films are sort of semi about religion and things like that. So they must have thought, you know, this guy's a safe pair of hands, and then he went off on and did his own thing, and they didn't like it. So yeah, I would say Dominion's better. I think it's the better one of the 2.
Okay.
But yeah, watch both of them if you have a spare 4 hours, because it's like really fascinating watching.
Good rain. It sounds like a sort of good thing to do on a rainy Sunday.
Yeah. Just a sort of Exorcist prequel, Schrader, Rennie Harlin kind of afternoon. Yeah.
I wonder who came out on top in the end.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, it's interesting to sort of point those sort of things out, because he's not without controversy. He's not without controversy. Maybe wrong. He's not without having those moments, those troubled productions,
Yeah, definitely.
those scrapes. He's obviously a bit of a maverick and someone that will do what he wants to do.
Yeah,
And
he's an auteur in that respect.
Yeah, there's something auteurish about that, isn't there? That sort of desire to champion his vision, not to be dissuaded by money men.
Yeah,
You know, which
absolutely.
I've always, even if the end project is shit,
I like
sort of
it,
admire that.
yeah.
It's a fantasy of a view in some cases.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Weird thing to do with a franchise. I don't know what he expected. Like, I don't know why they thought he could just, they'd let him get on with it. Obviously, they're not going to. They want it to. Like, they're giving him $30 million. Like, they're going to want it to make money. And a lot of his films don't tend to make that much money. And if it's like $5 million, like Card Counter or Master Gardener, that doesn't matter. Like, it'll probably make money back through streaming and ancillary revenues and stuff like that anyway. But with The Exorcist,
I
maybe
don't know
not.
If he really managed to get that back. Interesting. American Gigolo. You seen that? Richard Gere?
No, I have not seen
Very
it.
good. People rag on that movie, but I really like it.
Okay.
Just quickly, I mean, we should really start talking about The Master Gardener, but I just felt compelled. I even wrote in notes, defend American Gigolo.
Oh, there you go.
Because I love it.
I'll give it a watch.
Yeah, it's good. I think I've got it on DVD.
Oh, nice.
So
Please
do. It's I don't know, like it's a film I think that perfectly embodies the sort of seediness of the 80s really, really well.
Right, okay.
And the sort of, again, we talked about this a lot in our sort of previous episodes about how your perception of an era is sculpted by the culture of that, and how you choose to engage with that culture of that era.
Right, yeah.
But I mean, a lot of people sort of who are positive about the movie point to it as being a sort of powerful mediation on the sort of the excess of the 80s.
Right, yeah.
I think it's great, really, really good movie. It has been a while since I've seen it. I've only seen it the once, and I was expecting to be like really disappointed by it, and I just fucking loved it.
Oh, right, okay, yeah.
Worth a go. So yeah, just thought I'd mention that. American Gigolo, Richard Gere.
You've seen Cat People?
I have it. It arrived the other day, and I haven't watched it yet.
Yeah, me.
I've seen the original,
okay,
but I've not seen his remake. So I'm interested to get into that at some point.
I haven't seen it either. Just FYI, I thought
maybe we can watch it. And I think we made this joke last time, but we could tack it on.
Yeah.
Sort of a view on it.
There'll be a little pause in a minute, and then it will be clearly in a different room.
yeah.
Cat People, yeah.
So Master Gardener then. So we talk about these themes and ideas in Schrader's work. Redemption, a checkered past, or a backstory of horror or terror.
Yeah.
That has often lends itself to some sort of mental frailty, mental instability.
That
has left this character to sort of live on the periphery.
In
the case of this, it is a film about a character who is on the path to redemption.
Yes.
And mired by that past and brought into a situation through, as we sort of alluded to earlier, a sort of a love story. So the love story element brings to light that side of him that he is so desperately trying to move away from. Through the magic of horticulture.
Yes.
What were your sort of initial thoughts coming out of the film? Because you said the first 10 minutes you were a little bit unsure.
Yeah.
In terms of the things we've talked about, the elements of Schrader's work, the sort of filmmaker he is, does this film feel like a sort of a necessary continuation of those ideas?
Ultimately, yes. It was very similar. Like I already said before, like the plot was
see that.
Very similar.
Yeah.
But it did have.
I love it, but I can see that.
Yeah. Like it did have enough uniqueness for me to sort of enjoy it on its own terms. I thought it wasn't very subtle, but it didn't need to be. I think
Schrader doesn't really do that.
No,
subtlety isn't really his game. Because I thought the same thing. I thought, fucking the scene with the gun firing. I thought that's such classic Schrader. But anyone else had been pissed off by that. But I just thought the man's still got it. Do you know what I mean? Like,
you can pull it off.
And
there is something quite enjoyable about it, and it was an easy sit. I sat through it quite comfortably. Like it wasn't, sometimes you sort of have a tendency to sort of check my phone, or like you get a bit disinterested, but I was quite hooked by it ultimately, by his sort of plight, and that speaks to like how good Schrader is at bringing compassion to morally ambiguous characters. I mean, the guy was a Nazi sympathiser. That's part of the plot.
He was a white supremacist.
Effectively, and the way he plays with that, and the way that he there's that bit where he sort of says, I thought about removing the tattoo. He's got all these tattoos, of sort of horrible Nazi insignia, and he's like, I thought about it, but I chose not to. And I kind of weirdly felt for him in that moment. I was like, he doesn't want to explicitly forget what he's done before. He wants to keep it in a little box somewhere as something that he can kind of privately revisit and mediate on. Yeah. And I think that actually would help him on his journey towards redemption. Yeah. And not kind of choosing to forget about it. He kind of needs that to be there, and he needs those memories to stay quite fresh. I thought that was really kind of clever and really interesting. Yeah, what were your thought? It was sort of largely similar. Or?
Yeah, I think so. I really, really liked the movie a lot. The one thing that was really missing was the sort of religious element.
Okay,
I guess he sort of really tapped into that with First Reformed, as it's sort of explicitly about religion. Explicitly about the idea of, we talked earlier about that transcendental. One of the key aspects of transcendental cinema is that sort of stasis, that sort of floating almost rudderlessly through. And I think it really is really striking in First Reformed, because the rudderlessness comes from wanting answers and not getting them explicitly from your God. The God that you've dedicated your life to. And you're sort of becoming steadily more and more enveloped by this sort of rhetoric of fear regarding the climate crisis. It feels like humanity is on the edge of something that it cannot reverse. And the one thing that you think would give you solace doesn't. And I just think that's it's something that works so well with Schrader's style.
Yeah, definitely.
But I mean, back to Master Gardener, but it's not in. Religious element's not there, which is that's not criticism. I think it's interesting to see him move away from that and focus more explicitly on that sort of idea of redemption. I think it's the most challenging character he's ever created. For that path of redemption. We sort of touched on this earlier. I think I can completely understand why some people would be really turned off by that.
Oh yeah. But it is,
But interestingly, and this is something I wanted to run by, another question. Do you think the film works as a comment on experience as a tool of healing as opposed to incarceration?
Yeah, I didn't think about that.
And that, do you know what? This isn't necessarily I'm stealing this opinion. I've not even asked the person. It's our friend Eleanor that I went to see the film with.
Oh, right.
And she said it was really interesting the way the film depicts this idea of, obviously he goes out and takes up horticulture and just sort of connects with it immediately, and it becomes essential to his healing process and becoming someone else.
Cultivation.
So, I mean, it's a very literal metaphor, isn't it? Growing something.
There's a lot of voiceover which sort of hammers that home as well.
So, and again, in any other hands, it'd be hokey as fuck. But because it's Schrader, man, you're just like, I'm with you, man. I'm with you. I'll cuddle you on the boat. That's not an expression, but I just want to cuddle him on a boat.
I thought, mate, is that an expression?
No, definitely not. But it's really, I just want to run that idea by you that we talk about the prison system and incarceration and how high or the statistical likelihood is of you reoffending.
Yes.
On the basis that the prison system is ineffective. It's more just sort of out of sight, out of mind. Re-releasing these people back into the world, and you're sort of re-releasing them back into the same circles, the same mindset that they are supposed to have been cured from during their period in prison. And now, whilst the film doesn't sort of explicitly deal with that, it's more spoilers. Edgerton's character basically rats out all of his contacts in his white supremacist organisation, and as a result he's given a new identity and he gets his own case officer, and he is allowed to etch out this new life as a result. So it's not necessarily as explicit in the sense that it deals with this idea of being a comment on that, but I think it's interesting that she brought that up, and I was really thinking about that quite a lot, and I wanted your take on that. What do you think?
So that's the first time I didn't the kind of puzzle pieces didn't fit for me when I was watching it, but no, you're totally right. I think although there are moments in the film where he clearly kind of goes back to what he was like before, but then he's using it for a good reason all of a sudden. So it was quite clear to me that all of his sort of troubling thoughts and feelings towards ethnic minorities, they've all disappeared. Like he sort of appeared to me. It appeared to me like he was almost entirely rehabilitated from that through the medium of gardening, as opposed to incarceration. So yeah, I think in that respect, it does that kind of. It does have something to say, and there is something to be said for passionate individuals, let's say, and using that passion for the force of good, as opposed to the force of evil. And good and evil, some things that he kind of plays with quite a bit in his films.
Yeah,
so, yeah.
I think even in the scene where he breaks those guys' legs with the hammer.
Oh God, yeah.
Big spoiler.
Yeah,
but I mean, even though it's obviously for an outwardly better outcome, there is still something quite unsettling about that. He's revisiting that part of himself, which I think is classic Schrader. It's not quite as clear cut.
Yeah.
I mean, the ending sort of is bizarrely clear cut, but I think it boils back to that sort of fantasy element.
I thought so. Yeah, definitely.
But I agree with you. Just before we jump on the fantasy thing, I think that the film is quite a powerful comment on that in some ways. Again, a white supremacist gunman. It's a hard sell, and I completely fucking understand it if you don't buy that.
Yeah.
But I also think it's not necessarily cinema's job to reflect the need for stories that are sort of very black and white about that.
Yeah.
I think Schrader has done this, and I'm not sort of forgiving the elements of the film on that basis.
Yeah.
But I just think that by doing that, he's asking some more interesting questions about the nature of how we deal with these people.
Yeah.
And, I mean, Edgerton's character even says, I was born into a world that hated people like you.
Yes, that's right. That's a really great scene, actually, in that cafe.
And it just makes you wonder, like, how unfortunate. It makes you feel how unfortunate he was to have been born into that.
Yeah,
and to be raised into that world, and to sort of inherit that deep hatred. And of the fact that he has sort of reversed that shows that he probably didn't really feel it that strongly in the first place.
No, I think it was the influence. I got the impression it was the influence of others.
Yeah,
and
which is probably central to hatred in many ways.
Completely, yeah. And I feel
I'm saying that with no knowledge, but I mean, I'm sure there are some people out there that are just fucking wrong'uns.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that he isn't a wrong'un either, by the way. I mean, the film explores it fairly well. In the allotted time, there are some moments you think, fucking hell, this guy was a fucking nutter.
Oh, man, yeah.
And when we're not trivialising those moments in the film, but I think this is a part of our society that unfortunately exists, and how are we going to deal with that in a way that is going to be, the outcome is hopefully going to be positive.
Yeah.
I don't know, it's interesting.
That is interesting. I didn't think about that side of it at all, but it's actually, like, thinking about it, it's quite a strong side to the movie that I didn't consider. So there you go, that's really interesting. I would have liked to have seen more gardening in it, weirdly. I know that, sorry, we were kind of dealing with some quite hefty themes just
No, it's nice to move on to the gardening, because it is a lovely pursuit.
Yeah, I just thought, she starts explaining stuff about gardening. I was like, I like that in films where someone who clearly knows what they're talking about, or the character knows what they're talking about anyway, like, really gets deeper. Like, Aaron Sorkin's quite good at it. Yeah. He's quite good at, like, someone who's ridiculously passionate, just really delving into a subject area that the audience might not know that much about. And he starts it, and I was like, oh, here we go, I'm loving this. And then it sort of drifts away, and he doesn't ever really deliver on that promise, or what I perceive to be the promise anyway, of him just going on about flowers for ages, which weirdly I kind of wanted. I don't know, but the film isn't really that concerned with gardening, weirdly. It is more about human beings and the way they react to passion, and the way they react to their past, and how they're going to go on living. Exactly. But I would have liked to have seen more gardening in it. I don't know
3
why.
stars.
Yeah.
That fantasy element that we talked about, I think that so central to films like Taxi Driver, First Reformed, the ending of First Reformed.
Oh yeah.
The sort of superimposition of fantasy. It felt quite strong to me in this film.
Yeah.
The trajectory of the romance.
Yes.
Being with a girl that's significantly younger than him.
He loves an age gap, doesn't he?
Yeah,
Paul
he
Schrader?
does. Yeah,
like,
I know. It's a bit, oh, God.
And, that
but,
goes both ways as well. Like, this Sigourney Weaver character, he's like a sort of sexual relationship with her at the beginning.
That's quite well played out, I thought.
I do, yeah, it kind of works.
Sort of speaks to that idea of that sort of wealth, that American old wealth.
Yes, yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And there's something sort of weirdly dark and sort of horrible about it. I thought Sigourney Weaver was excellent in sort of carrying that sort of quiet. There's that sort of like, there's a decorum and a way to act proper.
Yeah.
It masks this sort of like childlike impulsiveness that can only have been developed through getting everything you want.
Yes, yeah.
And I think Sigourney Weaver really deals with that really well.
She
does that well.
Yeah.
So I forgot about that romance, but a younger, incredibly attractive woman who, by all accounts, should be vehemently opposed to his history as a white supremacist gunman. But it ends up after a sort of fairly sort of abrasive scene when she confronts him about his tattoos. It sort of turns quite quickly, and it makes me wonder about that fantasy element. And I'm not sure if Schrader's really commented on that too much, but I don't know. Like, I just find it really interesting that it resolves in a way that sort of it's kind of like a nice little package, very neatly tied up, and it makes me think that's fantasy. Has to be.
I mean, there's that scene like we sort of alluded to earlier of when they're driving that car through into the night, and all those flowers start blooming.
Yeah.
Very overtly a fantasy element, and that made me wonder, coupled with actually the bit right at the end, when he comes back to the garden and like Semi gets welcomed back, and then he says he's got like terms for his return. All of a sudden, Sigourney Weaver's like, I'll only come back if you let me live with this girl as like husband and wife.
Yeah.
And then she's basically like, no, that's mental. Are you mental? And he's like, right, I'll see you later. And then it's like he's believed it's worked.
Yeah,
and he goes back to her and they start dancing, and you're just like, I don't think this is gonna all right.
Yeah.
But there is something disjointed about that. I did get that vibe that ending might not be as happy as it appears.
It's interesting as well because we talk about the side characters, and I think you made a really great point earlier about these side characters almost sort of like trying to pull the main characters out of this moral quagmire. But these characters also have their own issues, and in the case of the love interest here, she is wrestling with drug addiction.
Yes,
and a sort of a life appears anyway, as Sigourney Weaver's character alludes to, a very difficult life growing up. With a mother who had her own issues, and I don't know. It sort of speaks again to that idea of the shared fantasy almost, which is something that Schrader dabbles with a little bit. I don't know. It's interesting. It sort of makes, not only does it sort of have this more interesting comment about the nature of sort of mental health treatment, but it also is just classic Schrader in the sense that he's obviously just wanting to, ruffle feathers in a way that is for a meaningful end. He's not just going, haha, fuck you lot, But again, if you see it that way, I can't really, I could totally see that argument too, to be fair. But no, I think you're right about that it is fantastical, and there's something chilling within the fantasy.
There is.
And something unresolved, which again speaks to that sort of transcendental. How many times we fucking say that in an episode?
You said it right. I said it wrong earlier, mate, to be fair.
To be fair, it probably isn't right. Probably realise like 3 weeks' time I'm saying it wrong.
First email from Paul Schrader.
Slag me off, will you? You fucking losers. That'd be amazing if you did that. I'd love that.
So good,
But it speaks to that style, that sort of without answers, because it's something that, unfortunately, there doesn't seem to be many answers. As to how to deal with it in a meaningful way, or at least answers that have been put into practice in a meaningful way. Anyway, I don't know. Again, straying into topics I know very little about, but
that's cool.
But I think it's a really great film, a really powerful addition to his filmography. Apparently, he's not done. He wants to make something else.
Good.
So
I'm glad.
I like that there are these filmmakers that are like well into their 70s who are just fucking chugging along making movies, like Scorsese. He can't be stopped. He's a beast. We'll obviously review his film 100%.
Oh yeah, Killers of the Flower Moon. Yeah, definitely.
Schrader wants to do another. You've got Spielberg still chugging away. These titans of the movie brats, right? The titans of sort of new American cinema. Still chugging on. It's crazy, isn't it?
Bizarre. Zemeckis, although Zemeckis hasn't done anything good in a while, I'd quite like to see him do something good again. The last good film I saw of his was Flight, I think.
Yeah, I thought Flight was okay.
Flight was pretty good. Yeah. I mean, he's quite middling. Anyway, he's a bit like Ridley Scott in that it's like it can go drastically wrong for him, Yeah.
So, but anyway, quickly, back to Master Gardener.
Yeah.
I think a really worthy addition. And I think it really sort of embodies a lot of those ideas of his filmography, and it makes for a challenging watch. And I would implore anyone, even if you feel that by our discussion that it won't be for you, to watch it, because I think again, cinema should still challenge us.
Yeah, you don't have to. I don't think you have to like Joel Edgerton's character in it. I don't think you have to like him.
No.
Yeah, you just have to be with him on the journey.
Yeah,
and also get if you're thinking in the first 10 minutes, not sure about this, stick with it, because it turns into something quite special, and something quite, even despite what I said earlier, quite unique as well.
Yeah.
So I liked it a lot. I thought it was entertaining. I don't know why it was entertaining.
Schrader does that, man. His films are entertaining. Like he will, there'll be tension. There'll be, I watched a film, just as a quick aside before we do the outro, I watched Rolling Thunder, and that is a fucking ridiculous movie.
Yeah.
But it's like, again, that sort of Vietnam era sort of trauma. That sort of collective and individual trauma of the nation, and the way that patriotism, and he's sort of waving the flags and gifting the veterans, cars and stuff as tokens of appreciation. It's all artifice. It's all surface level.
Yeah.
The way the characters respond to him when he starts telling them stories about how the Vietnamese tortured him and gouged out his humanity. They don't want to know, and it's emblematic of that sort of attitude to the fallout from America's imperialist attempts at imperialism. And it's also weird because outwardly it's the most wacky film because he has a hook for a hand. His hand gets put in what do they have in America? Those things you put your food in.
A garbage disposal.
Garbage disposal. He gets his hand put in that.
Fuck.
And he kill his family. These guys and nick some coins, and he goes on a tale of vengeance. I don't know why I felt bringing it up at the end, but
that's right. Yeah, it's good.
It's fresh in the mind, but it's again another interesting film in his filmography, and I can't remember how it links to what we were talking about, but it's staying anyway.
Yeah.
Fuck it.
Listeners will know because they just listened to it.
Yeah.
Listeners, sorry.
Yeah. Anyway, Schrader's back, and we love it.
Yes, good stuff.
Outro.
Questing the cinematic void.
There we have it then.
So there we do have it indeed. Yes.
There we. Schrader, Master Gardener. Very good.
Yeah.
On to next week.
Yes.
So we have pretty much all but confirmed Bloxploitation cinema discussion for next week.
Yeah, very excited.
Very much excited about that. Ever since me, you, and our dear friend Alfie, fellow Cineman, were drunkenly chatting about podcast episode ideas, and I say for a few months ago, I've just been just so up for it. The moment he said the term Bloxploitation and the films that are attached to it, it's just, I've been so excited to talk about it.
I haven't forgotten about it, and I'm trying to watch as many as I can. It's quite hard actually because it's quite difficult to be. Yeah, it's difficult to find them. It's difficult to be in the mood for them as well.
Yeah,
I've managed Green Street so far. Watch that. I'm going to watch Rise of the Foot Soldier.
That is fucking hell. I keep trying to find Rise of the Foot Soldier, and for a while I'm sure it was on Netflix, but now it's just all of the sequels, but not the original.
I was just going to say, all the sequels are on there. It's really strange.
So I might have to just watch all the sequels and try to remember my hazy memory of a shit film. But, I'm really up for that discussion. I think it'll be a lot to lay into there, which we haven't done in a while, so I'm looking forward to it.
Definitely, yeah.
Following on from that, either next week or the week after, we'll see how it goes. Obviously, depending on what happens, but we want to also cover Flash. The new Flash film, DC's effort to try and sort of retcon the whole Snyderverse.
Yeah, not the Bleach, the film. Yeah, don't want to review the Bleach. That would be weird. Yeah. Sorry, go on.
No, it's good. And sort of set everything up for James Gunn's attempt to put DC in a similar pegging as Marvel.
Yes.
In a landscape that, even though the money is still around, there feels like there's a growing sense of fatigue around the genre.
I think so.
So it's going to be interesting to see how that goes, and indeed this film. And obviously everything with Ezra Miller as well. I mean, it's very strange. There's a lot of strangeness around this movie.
Yeah, I've been keeping up with that, actually. It's really odd.
See, I don't know really that much about it. I know the key details, but
it's unusual, and it's quite sad as well. I think ultimately it's just sort of quite sad, and he's not billed like on the posters or anything. Like, I mean, he's in it, but he's in costume and stuff. Like, I think it's interesting the way Warner Brothers have approached that, and their decision not to recast, reshoot everything, and kind of based on test screenings as well. Not based on like any kind of faith in him and his sort of recovery. It's about test screenings and how much people apparently loved it in test screenings. Anyway, we'll go more about this another time. But
yes, yeah. So maybe, hopefully we can get a couple in the bag. But we do. I really wanted to discuss that because I think the DC Warner Brothers thing is so fascinating. Given their attempts to sort of ape Marvel's success, largely failing in doing so.
Yep.
And we might even flirt with a long-standing podcast series discussion about fandom, because that's, I think, a big part of DC's current popularity, and indeed the sort of negativity around its future, which is so depressing to to sort of have to read about. But there we go.
Yeah.
In the meantime, have a lovely week.
Yes.
Enjoy this episode. Enjoy 18 other episodes.
Yes.
The big 20 next. It'd be fitting Blaxploitation be 20.
I was thinking that.
Yeah,
20th episode. Yeah.
So we will see you in the next one.
See you then.
Lots of love. See you later.
Bye.